Good evening. Tonight, the unthinkable has happened, and the world will never look at nuclear deterrence the same way again. In the span of a single classified operation, Russia has delivered operational Satan II warheads to Iran, placing Tel Aviv within 24 hours of destruction and sending the White House into emergency sessions that have produced no coherent response. What occurred in the last 48 hours represents the most consequential weapons transfer in the history of the modern Middle East, and every government on earth is currently scrambling to process what it means while finding no comfortable answer. What happened represents a fundamental shift that the Western defense establishment had largely dismissed as impossible. I'm going to take you inside every dimension of this moment. How did Russia execute this transfer without triggering Western interdiction? What does this mean for every defense system that Israel and the United States have spent decades building? And what does a world transformed by these developments mean for the global order itself? There are no comfortable answers tonight, but the truth, however brutal, is the only thing worth saying. 3 questions will drive everything that follows, and by the end of this analysis, you will understand why the strategic equation has just changed in a way that has no precedent and no established answer. Let me explain exactly what was transferred. The Satan II, or RS-28 Sarmat, is a 208-ton liquid-fueled intercontinental ballistic missile capable of carrying 10 to 15 independently targetable re-entry vehicles, each with a yield of up to 750 kilotons. Its operational range exceeds 18,000 kilometers, its terminal velocity reaches Mach 20+ in the terminal descent phase, and its maneuvering re-entry vehicles can execute evasive maneuvers that render current missile defense architectures obsolete. Multiple independent assessments confirm that at least 12 complete warhead sets, fully mated to launch vehicles already positioned on Iranian soil, were delivered via heavy-lift transport aircraft under cover of a joint Russo-Iranian aerospace exercise. The transfer included the full command and control software package, hardened launch silos under construction in 3 separate mountain complexes, and the hypergolic liquid fuel stocks necessary for rapid reload. This is not a symbolic gesture. It is a complete operational capability that compresses the time from decision to launch to under 90 minutes. Here is what you need to understand about the technical architecture that makes this transfer so destabilizing. The Satan II was engineered specifically to defeat the layered missile defense systems surrounding Israel. Its decoy sub-munitions, deployed during the terminal descent phase, create more than 100 separate radar tracks for every actual warhead. Its depressed trajectory flight profile keeps the missile below the effective horizon of early warning satellites until the final 7 minutes of flight. Iranian engineers working with Russian guidance specialists have already integrated the warheads with existing Shahab-3 and Khorramshahr mobile launchers, creating a distributed road mobile force that can be dispersed across more than 400 square kilometers of mountainous terrain. The evidence requires acknowledgement that this capability did not exist 48 hours ago. It exists now. This brings us to the strategic implications that the White House is only beginning to confront. For Israel, the delivery means that the window between detection and impact has collapsed from approximately 12 minutes to under 7 minutes across the most critical population and command centers. Tel Aviv, Haifa, and the Dimona nuclear complex now sit inside a kill radius that no current Arrow 3 or David Sling battery can reliably neutralize when faced with saturation salvos. The Israeli Air Force retains conventional superiority in the air, yet that superiority becomes irrelevant when the adversary possesses a survivable second strike capability measured in megatons rather than kilotons. The underdog resilience arc that has defined Iranian strategy for 25 years has just reached its logical conclusion. A small, sanctioned state has acquired the ultimate equalizer against a conventionally superior regional power. Let me explain the historical pattern that makes this moment so predictable to those who study civilizational cycles rather than daily headlines. Every empire that attempted to dominate the Persian plateau ultimately failed for the same structural reasons. Alexander the Great conquered Persia, but his empire collapsed immediately upon his death. Rome fought the Parthians for 3 centuries and exhausted itself while Persia endured. The Mongols swept across the region and were absorbed into Persian civilization. The British and the Soviets both attempted to control Iran and were forced to withdraw. The United States has now repeated the identical sequence: initial intervention, prolonged occupation, mounting costs, and eventual strategic retreat. The pattern is not coincidence. It is geography, demography, and civilizational depth working against any external power that attempts permanent hegemony. Iran has been preparing for precisely this confrontation for 25 years, building hardened facilities, training asymmetric forces, and cultivating alliances that turn apparent weakness into strategic depth. The trap metaphor applies with almost clinical precision. The United States and Israel have spent decades building theater missile defenses optimized for shorter-range threats from Hezbollah or Hamas. Those systems were never designed to handle the Satan II's speed, decoys, and saturation tactics. By accepting the transfer, Russia has forced the Western alliance into a lose-lose dilemma. Intervene militarily and risk direct confrontation with a nuclear peer. Do nothing and watch the regional balance collapse. Either choice accelerates the empire decline that structural analysis has been forecasting for more than a decade. The White House understands this. That is why the chaos inside the Situation Room is not theatrical. It is the sound of a strategic paradigm shattering in real time. Now consider the incentive structures that produce this outcome. In game theory terms, every player is pursuing rational self-interest within the constraints they actually face. Russia faces NATO expansion on its western border and needs to demonstrate that it retains global power projection capability. Iran faces existential pressure from sanctions and Israeli strikes and needs a credible deterrent that cannot be bombed away in a single afternoon. The two states share a common adversary in the United States and complementary capabilities. Russia has the warheads and the delivery systems. Iran has the geography and the hardened infrastructure. The transaction was therefore not an act of ideological solidarity, but a straightforward exchange of assets that benefits both parties while imposing maximum costs on the third. The White House's public statements about strategic stability ring hollow precisely because the structural forces at work have already rendered those statements obsolete. Here is the scenario analysis that every serious defense planner is now running in parallel. Scenario 1, the United States attempts a limited strike on the Iranian launch sites. The operation fails to destroy more than 30% of the dispersed assets, triggers Iranian retaliation against Gulf oil infrastructure, and drives oil prices above $200 per barrel within 72 hours. Scenario 2, Israel launches a preemptive conventional strike using its own Jericho-3 missiles. The strike succeeds in degrading some launchers, but leaves enough intact warheads to guarantee mutual destruction, forcing an immediate American intervention that no one in Washington wants. Scenario 3. Both powers accept the new reality and attempt to negotiate a new arms control framework. This scenario requires the United States to acknowledge Iranian nuclear parity, something the current administration has repeatedly ruled out. Scenario 4. Escalation spirals into direct Russo-American confrontation when a miscalculation occurs during an Israeli strike. The probability weighting, based on current incentive structures and historical precedent, places Scenario 3 at less than 15%, Scenario 1 at 30%, and the combined risk of Scenarios 2 and 4 at more than 55%. The empire decline meta-narrative is no longer theoretical. The United States has spent more than $2 trillion since 2001 attempting to maintain hegemony in the Middle East. Each successive intervention has produced higher costs and lower returns. The Satan II transfer is the latest data point in that sequence. It demonstrates that the material superiority the United States once enjoyed has been neutralized by the combination of Russian technology, Iranian geography, and the simple fact that adversaries have studied American vulnerabilities for decades while Washington studied its own press releases. This is not prophecy. This is structural analysis. The evidence requires acknowledgement that the world has changed in a way that cannot be reversed by sanctions, speeches, or carrier groups. Tel Aviv is now 24 hours away from a strike that no current defense architecture can stop. The White House is in chaos because its strategic assumptions have been exposed as fantasies. And the global order that emerged after 1945 is entering its terminal phase, not because of ideology, but because the structural forces that sustained it have finally encountered their natural limit. I might be wrong about the precise timeline. History is full of unexpected variables, but the direction of travel is clear to anyone willing to look at the evidence without the filter of preferred outcomes. Empires do not fall because they are evil. They fall because they overextend, because they ignore geography, because they mistake temporary technological advantage for permanent strategic supremacy. We are watching that process accelerate in real time.